Welcome, everyone, to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. Will and Jex are joining me this morning, afternoon, whatever you want to call it. And this is an episode we've been planning for a while. This is the type of episode people will keep asking us for, so we aim to please. This is going to be a long one. You might want to watch this one in doses. We are counting down the top 30 albums from 1982, ranked by us. Matt did the rankings. He didn't sit in on this one for us, but he was a big help. And so we've narrowed it down to 30 albums, and the rankings are very, very interesting. Quite a lot of variety, and I've noticed some trends here, but for the most part, between the three of us, our rankings are all over the place. So it's kind of impossible to predict how these are going to turn out. So we may miss some of your favorite 1982 albums, or we may have them, or we may have some that you weren't expecting. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to it, going back, believe it or not, 40 years to 1982. I'm the only one that was alive in 1982, so that's always a lot of fun. So we rank them, and the person that ranked them the highest is going to talk about that particular album. So Will is going to start us off at number 30 with Fleetwood Mac's Mirage album.
Interesting. I don't have this album, fun fact. But as far as Fleetwood Mac goes, I haven't gotten into their stuff a ton. I did get into this album after I saw the Rumors tribute band play a few years ago. Because when they played Gypsy, that became one of my favorite songs from Fleetwood Mac, actually. And Hold On is also obviously a really good song off that album as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting album. Hold Me, I think, is what you meant to say.
Oh yeah, Hold Me.
Not Hold On, but this is an interesting album because it's the first Fleetwood Mac album in 3 years when it came out. It followed on the heels of Tusk, which was a very experimental double album, which in turn was the follow-up to Rumors, which of course is one of the biggest selling albums of all time. So Tusk was a big selling album, but not as big as the record company would have liked. I'm pretty sure they came back to the band and said, just give us a regular Fleetwood Mac album, please and thanks. So yeah, some good songs on here. I really like Lindsay's Eyes of the World, like that one. Book of Love is good. It's not the type of stuff we normally talk about on here, but yeah, good enough to crack the top 30. So that's our first. Thank you, Will. Now, number 29, an album I'm surprised didn't rank a little bit higher, was released on June 8th. It is Survivor's Eye of the Tiger. Now, of course, the title song is pop culture. It's just one of those songs that will outlive the band, that will outlive us all, you know. It's become an expression. And but the album that it came off of was pretty successful. Was actually Survivor's third, the band on the back, kind of going for the lover boy, the red and the black leather. And this album is really good melodic rock. It's not my favorite Survivor album, but it's really good. It's got one of my favorite album tracks by them, a song called Feels Like Love. There was a top 20 single that came off of this album other than Eye of the Tiger called American Heartbeat, which I don't ever remember hearing on the radio, which is odd for a song to chart that high. Hesitation Dance is really good. It's just typical Survivor, but of course it will always be overshadowed by the title song. Was such a massive part of the 1980s, probably one of the most successful soundtrack songs ever. And it's almost just become synonymous with fighting, like with a boxing match, you know? So, but we're checking out in its own right. Got a lot of good songs on it. So that's number 29. Next one. This one is one of our very interesting rankings. This one, Jex rated down at the bottom at number 46, because between the three of us, we submitted a total of 46 albums. Will rated it at number 30, and I rated it all the way up to number 4. And
wow,
it's the album that gave the channel its name, Kansas and Vinyl Confessions. Here, I've got the 8-track version, and this came out. Wikipedia won't tell me exactly; it will only say June. But yeah, so I did an episode of The Contrarians where I argued for this album as the best Kansas album. Now, do I think it's the best Kansas album? It's definitely one of the best. And it's the first album that the singer John Elephant sang on after Steve Walsh took a temporary leave from the band to come back. He sounds a lot like Steve Walsh, so they didn't lose any momentum there. They had a big hit single with the song Play the Game Tonight. This album is a bridge between the classic prog sounding Kansas and a more 80s rock style sound. They've still got Robbie Steinhardt on occasional vocal and the violin in some of the songs, but the songs are a little bit more straightforward, and there are a lot of great ones on here, like Right Away and Windows and Crossfire. And I love this album. I love this band. So if I can talk about them, I can talk about them, even if they're all the way down at 28. So next up, now this is where things get really, really interesting. So I'm noticing trends. I'm noticing trends here with these rankings. I'm not so much for the heavy stuff. Jex isn't so much for the more melodic stuff. But then again, there are exceptions to every rule. So at number 27, Jex is going to talk to us about the debut album from one of the quintessential new wave bands of the early 80s and one of the quintessential hairstyles of the 80s by Mike Score, lead singer of A Flock of Seagulls. I was not expecting this album. There it is. Jex, tell us about why you both have it. Okay.
Hey, Will. You know
Honestly, what? I know 2 songs on this album. So take it away, Jex. Tell us about A Flock of Seagulls.
Well, as you said, I brought this to the table not expecting it to make the top 30 at all. But I thought, you know what? I like this album. But yeah. So Flock of Seagulls, everybody knows the hit song on here, I Ran So Far Away, which is actually the opener on here, the US pressing, but in the UK, apparently it's track 3. The tracks are all different on both editions. I didn't know that, but this is the opener here, opens up the album beautifully. And because of that song, they're pretty much considered a one-hit wonder, right? Everybody knows that song. You know, most people might be tired of that song. I never got tired of it. I think it's catchy as all heck. But the thing about it is people don't bother to check the rest of the album based on that song. But if you check out the whole album in its entirety, there's some great songs on here. To me, they're much more than a one-hit wonder. They were a great band. This is like in the new wave scene of the early 80s, you know, before pop really became what it was with like Madonna and the Paul Abdul or what have you. But this is still very new wavy. And I love it. I recommend checking out the songs Messages, Telecommunication, and Standing in the Doorway. It's some great stuff. Got like the tiny hint of punk attitude in there. I like it a lot.
Cool. Yeah, Space Age Love Song is the other song off of this album that was a chart hit. Right. And I also thought the other song I know by them is that one, Wishing If I Had a Photograph of You, but I guess that was on their next album.
Yes.
So there you go. This is already, you guys can see we're all over the place. So 1982 is a very geared music. So number 26, this one is one that I'm going to talk about. Released on May 4th, 1982, the 5th album by my favorite Southern rock band, 38 Special Forces, which actually comes 1 year after Alice Cooper released an album called Special Forces. This is on A&M Records, and this follows after their first big album, Wild Eyed Southern Boys, 1980. Special Forces starts off with one of their highest charting songs, Caught Up in You. It's a classic rock radio staple. Very, very catchy. Great vocals, as usual, from Don Barnes, who's one of the unsung heroes of 80s rock. A lot of people like his voice. Nobody knows his name. Also, Donnie Van Zant takes some lead vocal. He has some good songs on here, like Backdoor Stranger, Breaking Loose, Firestarter, Roughhousing. Chain Lightning is another cool rocker on this album. That's actually an earlier example of drop D, and you wouldn't expect drop D in 38 Special, but they utilized it a few times. It's not my favorite album by them, and some of the songs get a little bit fillery towards the end, but it's still pretty good and enough to recommend it. And that's why I actually ranked this album at 18, but it finishes out at number 26. So now, number 25, we're going to get very Canadian. We're going to get very, very heavy. Jex rated this album all the way up at number 7. Metal on Metal by Anvil. Oh, you got a picture disc.
One of the only, I think the only picture disc I have. Because it's not an easy album to come by on vinyl. There's that. I have the CD as well. I really, really like this album. As far as Canadian metal goes, this is among the best. And this was my introduction to Anvil. I found this at Walmart summer 2009, saw it in a bin there, was all by itself, one copy. I'm like, what is this? I saw the guys back there. I was like, they look crazy, but not enough to buy it. I left it. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be any good. Then I was at home, I was thinking about it. Couldn't even remember their names. I had to look up. I remembered it was on Attic Records. So I looked up artists on Attic Records, and luckily they start with A, so they were on top of the list. And I'm like, Anvil. I went on YouTube, checked out the song Metal on Metal. I was like, I'm getting this CD. And I've been a fan ever since. And there's not much I could say about this that hasn't been said. I mean, to anyone who hasn't seen the documentary, The Story of Anvil, I recommend checking it out because it tells you everything you need to know about the band, how they should have been bigger after this release, because this album was huge. To me, this is their best, not only in terms of songs, but in terms of production. The producer on this was a man called Chris Sangarides. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. His nickname is CT, so. Right? He produced albums for big bands, Thin Lizzy, Halloween. I took some notes here. Hold on. Y&T. Who is it?
Y&T. He produced Mean Street.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. So
he also produced a bunch of albums by the Tragically Hip, oddly enough, later on.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's going to change. But yeah, so the production on here is just top notch, and the songs are great. Metal on Metal is their anthem. It's they close every show with that song. I love it still. Mothra is a favorite on here. Tag Team is another great song. It's a bit on the dirty side lyrically, but that's to be expected from Anvil. You know, they're not called the Real Life Spinal Tap for nothing. There's also 666, which again is lyrically kind of cheesy, but take it for what it is. It's nothing to be taken seriously. And yeah, I love this album. I love it a lot.
Cool. Okay, now for something completely different. Actually, it's right in between two really heavy albums. Number 24. Released on April 8th. There's a few albums here that came out in April. Toto IV. And if you look at it, there are 4 rings around this sword to signify the 4th album. And this was a huge album. It starts with Rosanna and ends with Africa. And for 80s pop rock, it doesn't get much better. There's unsung gems on this album that most people haven't heard. This cool rock song here called Afraid of Love. I Won't Hold You Back is a top 10 ballad. Good For You is another really fun pop rock song on here. Like I said, if you're in the mood for that type of music, this is the one, and this is the one Toto album that, you know, to listen to if it's not a greatest hits album for sure. Even though it's probably not my favorite, I argued for a different one on the Contrarians. But yeah, that's my choice for number 24. Now I'm going to send these guys scurrying away because at number 23, we've got a little Teutonic German metal, and Jex is going to tell us about Restless and Wild by Accept.
There you go.
Well, that's an old tape. That's cool.
Yeah. This is all I have. I wish I had it on vinyl or even CD, but this is all I have for this album. Great stuff. Album number 4 for this German metal band, which I always mistakenly consider them as part of the new wave of British heavy metal because they just have that sound. They fit right in with bands such as Saxon or even Maiden or Judas Priest, but they're from Germany, and you wouldn't know it. I think that even though there's no accents to be found. I find this is some great stuff. That opening song, it's the first song I heard on here called "Fast as a Shark," and it just hits you. It just grabs you right from the jugular. It starts out with that crackle of an old record playing, and then you hear this old like playful like jingle, like hi dee hi do hi da, and then the record just skips, and then you hear that this Rob Halford like scream, which I do know justice, by the way, but that's actually the vocalist here, which is Udo Dirkschneider. And man, that guy has some pipes, and then the guitars kick in, and just it's some heavy stuff, even by today's standards. This is some heavy guitar work, if I do say so myself. And the rest of the album just keeps going from there. There's not one bad song on here. And if you're not familiar with these guys and you like Maiden, you like Priest, check out Accept. People are probably more familiar with their later stuff. Balls to the Wall was like a big hit for them, which the first thing I heard from them actually. But then I heard this and I was an instant fan. So yeah, Restless and Wild.
Yeah, that is generally considered to be a classic album, and an early that song "Fast as a Shark" is generally considered one of the first thrash metal songs, or at least an influence on it. And the reason that you think new wave or British heavy metal, they shared stages with so many of those bands. You know, there were a lot of bills. So next up at number 22, one thing about 1982 is that there were a lot of debuts, or there were significant debuts for me. And one of my favorite sort of unsung bands, and a very little catalog, put their first album out in 1982. And we are still in mainland Europe. We're going to Holland for this band, Vandenberg. And, if you're a diehard Whitesnake fan, you'll know the name Adrian Vandenberg. He's the guitar player, he's the songwriter, and this is his band. Their first album came out in 1982, sometime in April. That's as much as I could get. Fantastic melodic hard rock, but leaning towards the a little bit more technical. It's got that European heavy hard rock. Like, it's not metal. I wouldn't call it out and out metal, but some songs skirt the edges. They scored a top 40 single in the States with one of my favorite ballads of all time called Burning Heart. It's my favorite guitar solo in any song ever. Check it out if you've never heard it. And they released 3 albums in the 80s, and then just in 2020 reunited with a completely different lineup, just Adrian. And I think they're working on a new album as well. It's all high quality stuff. If you love 80s hard rock metal guitar playing, you will love Adrian Vandenberg. His solos are melodic. They are really, he can play really fast, but always melodic and very, very unique, his sense of phrasing. And the singer on these first 3 albums is a great singer by the name of Bert Hearing. And he does sing with a little bit of that English as a second language thing. So you sometimes have to listen close to hear what he's saying. But once you get used to it, guy's got great pipes. I can't say enough good things about this album. So I rated this all the way up at number 3, but we got bounced down to number 22, which that's okay. So yeah, first Vandenberg.
I actually listened to that for the first time a few days ago. It didn't make my top 30. I didn't know what it was, but I checked it out, and it's some great stuff. It took me by surprise. Like, it would have probably sneaked onto my top 30 if I would have known what it was. Ready for You, Too Late, and Lost in a City. Those songs, I really like them. They took me by surprise. So I look forward to checking it out again.
So number 21, now this one's cool because there's a few where I would have thought, well, I'll be the one talking about this album, but I'm not. So Jex rated this at 32. I rated it at 17, and Will rated it at 14. So he is going to be talking about April Wine Power Play, seen here on a 8-track version. I need to tell you something about this just quickly. Anyone who uses Discogs, I've mentioned this before, you can scan, when you get a new CD, a new record, you can scan it right into your collection just by scanning the barcode on your phone. If you scan the barcode on some of these old 8-tracks, they still work. It comes up as the 8-track version. Barcodes were ahead of their time. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe that when I was going through it. I'm like, I wonder if this works. And sure enough, it did. So yeah, Will, tell us about Power Play.
So I don't own this because, as you two know, I've been looking for April Wine for probably well over a year. Can't find it on CD, vinyl, just not having any luck with it. But April Wine for me is like super consistent. All the albums I've heard, they're not like my favorite, but I like them all. Power Play is one of the first ones I've heard. I heard all the way through a little over a year ago. And it's just good Canadian rock music. They were in Moncton, I believe, last
Yep.
year or a couple years before, the whole
2019.
everything got shut down. But I regretted not going to see them. Check them out after that, and I've just loved. This is one of the best albums I've heard from them. But like I said, they're super consistent.
Yeah, April Wine are the band I've seen in concert. I've seen them 5 times. I've seen them more than any other band. And actually, unless it gets canceled, because you never know, Miles Goodwin, the singer from April Wine, is playing at the Fredericton Playhouse on February 19th. And Matt and I are going to be going to that show. And I think it's a combination of playing and talking, because a few years ago, Miles put out his autobiography, which he cleverly titled Just Between You and Me. And so that'll be interesting. Power Play followed up The Nature of the Beast, which we talked about in our 1981 episode, which was their most successful album. And Power Play has been described as a good album that had the misfortune of coming after a great album. So it is really, really good. Enough is Enough was the big hit off of this album. And I love the song. It's a fun, poppy, catchy song. Still gets a lot of airplay in Canada. It's the only song that I can almost play the guitar solo to all the way through. Opening track, Anything You Want, You Got It, is really exciting hard rocker built to open a show. There's other unsung rockers on here like Blood Money and Ain't Got Your Love, Runners of the Night, Waiting on a Miracle. Good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, thanks for that, Will. That was a fun surprise. So now we have reached the top 20. We are about to go into our top 20. And Jex is going to tell us, number 20. Jex is going to take us back to Germany for the Scorpions and their album Blackout.
Yes. There you go. Here's the cover here. Love this artwork. Always have been. Like, what's going on here? I don't know, but it's badass. Oh, look, Will has it too. Nice. There we go. Again, I don't have much to say about it other than I think this is a fine album. Probably my favorite from Scorpions. Animal Magnetism is another one. I'm not a fan of their later, when they had those big hits like Rocky Like a Hurricane, stuff like that. Started being really a radio band, but this stuff here, they were still very heavy stuff. And I love it. Just like the opening title track, Blackout. It again, like I said, for Accept, it really just catches your attention right out of the gate and sets the stage for a wonderful experience that is this album. So yeah, if you're not familiar with it, if you're only familiar with the radio stuff from Scorpions, check this out. It's gonna rock you. Maybe like a hurricane.
This album for me is actually one that surprised me the most. I've listened to it before. I bought a couple Scorpion CDs, mostly the greatest hits, knew some of the main songs, but when I was doing my rankings for this and listened to this album, I think I listened to it like 3 times in a row. Like, this album is just solid all the way through. And yeah, it went up a lot further on my rankings than I thought it was going to.
All right, number 19. Moving along, we have another album that came out sometime in April. We don't know when. I actually ranked this at number 11, so it almost hit my top 10. We talked about this band briefly when we did our 1976 episode. So it's an era of this band that some people really like and some people dismissed. And if you're into the more melodic hard rock, your chances are you're going to be in this camp. So the album is Rainbow, Straight Between the Eyes. And this is the second of the 3 albums that had singer Joel Turner on, who's a great singer, kind of like a Lou Gramm, Paul Rogers type of singer, very soulful. This is my favorite of the 3 Joel Turner era albums. I think it's the most successful because it definitely had the most successful single in the song Stone Cold, which is kind of a ballad, but this has some heavy songs on it, like the opener Death Alley Driver, which might surprise people if they think this is the poppy era of Rainbow. Eyes of Fire is a kind of a mystical one. It's actually the one song on here that you could almost picture Dio singing. It's very, very cool. Bring on the Night's another cool one. This is a good hard rock album. And, you know, if this had been a brand new band coming out, it might have done better. And I say that because I think a lot of people expected, you know, a Rainbow album, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Okay, well, this is going to be medieval, and it's going to, and it's not at all like that. I just find this a solid album from start to finish. So I definitely wanted to make sure this was on my list so I could give it some attention that this era doesn't always get. Now, number 18 is an album that Will's going to talk about, which I don't know anything about, really. I know a little bit about the group, but Will rated this all the way up at number 11. The band was called Girl, and the album is called Wasted Youth, and he's actually got the CD. That is the first time I've actually seen an actual Girl CD. Now, I know basically three things about this band, and Will's probably going to tell you at least some of them. So, Will, take it away. Tell us about this album.
So I heard of this band reading Phil Collins' book, who eventually went on to join Def Leppard. It was actually after this album that he did that. So this came out in 82, obviously. This is actually their first album that came out in 1980. You can see Phil over here. So yeah, he basically was in this band Girl before he joined Def Leppard. It was a matter of break first, them or Def Leppard. Phil wasn't going to join Def Leppard. He was going to stay in this band, but they actually told him that Def Leppard probably had a better chance of breaking, which was true. And he left to join Def Leppard. But this is just a really solid rock album. The singer on here is Phil Lewis, who eventually went on to sing in LA Guns. The other guitar player was Gary Laffey. He went on to do demos with Duran Duran on Notorious and also did some solo work. Simon Laffey also played guitar, didn't really turn out to anything. And Bryson Graham played all the drums on this album, but Pete Barnacle is actually pictured as the drummer on the album, but as far as I understand, didn't play at all. So yeah, this was slightly less successful than their first album, I believe, but I actually prefer this album. It's just old, classic, 82 rock music. I believe they're from the UK, but Ice in the Blood, the title track, Wasted Youth, there's just good rock music on here, and it made it in my, well, number 11.
Cool. So the next one we're going to talk about is another debut at number 17. This is actually one of the albums that the three of us rated somewhat consistently. We weren't too far off on this one. And actually, it's when I saw your lists come in, I totally forgot about this. And so, well, I gotta rejig my list then because I really like this album. So Will rated it at number 22. I rated it at number 20. And Jax rated it at number 16. So he is going to tell us about the debut album from Twisted Sister,
Yes.
Under the Blade.
Oh, nice. You have it. I don't have that album at all, but it is a terrific debut. It's, you know, Twisted Sister had been on the scene for about 10 years now. They formed, I think, in 72. They were a club band. It had a lot of different lineups and formations before hitting it big. Well, not hitting it big, but getting their first studio album. So they had a whole decade, a 10-year gap before that finally came out. But was it ever worth the wait? Because they really proved themselves on this album. They tell us who they are, and you know, they don't hide anything. The songs are killer. The title track, Under the Blade, is a great one. Great heavy stuff. I'm trying to think. I'm drawing a blank on the other ones. Destroyer is a fantastic song as well. And I think that on this album they proved that they can translate from stage to studio, because sometimes live bands are a lot better and it doesn't always work out, you know, on tape. But I think they did a great transition. I've heard the live stuff, I've heard the albums, and there's a consistency that, you know, they both sound great. What else can I say about that album? the earlier stuff is a lot heavier. Of course, a lot of people know the later, Stay Hungry. That was like their big album with like Dee Snider on the cover, where it was all about him. Here, I think it's all about the band. They're all on the cover, and it's much heavier. By Stay Hungry, that was on Atlantic, which is notorious for toning down the heavy stuff. Overproduced and what have you. This here, it was released on a label called Secret Records, which is independently owned, so there was not as many rules. So it's really raw. It's who they are. And funnily enough, the album was remixed by Atlantic in '85, which is a lot poppier. Which is funny. It must have been a trend for '82 albums to be remixed and re-released in '85.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get ahead of myself. We'll talk about that later. But that's pretty much all I have to say about the Under the Blade. Great album. And I recommend checking it out. If you only know the Stay Hungry stuff, check out this album. It'll blow you away.
Under the Blade is really heavy. It's a metal album. I wouldn't necessarily call Twisted Sister a metal band. I'd call them more of a hard rock band. This is a metal album. I was very fortunate to find this CD at a store in Presque Isle, Maine, in '92. And I don't know when this actually came out, but Secret Records went under like after they put their first album up, but someone repressed it and put it out on CD. So this is the original cover. And as you mentioned, Atlantic, so they signed to Atlantic, they put out You Can't Stop Rock and Roll and then Stay Hungry. When that album became big, they reissued this album with a different cover. It's the band in the same pose with a blade behind them. This is much more menacing. I mean, look at Dee there. And look at the big, huge blade behind them all. And then the cool thing is, like on the back, they're just in street clothes. And there are songs off this album that they would always play in concert. Like they opened many a show with What You Don't Know Sure Can Hurt You, which is just fast and heavy. And as a matter of fact, that song was the inspiration for Dave Snake Sabo to write Slave to the Grind, because he wanted to write a song that was fast and that would open a show and just kind of be like an assault on them. The other there is a slight remix of the '85 remix. They toned it down a little bit. This one's very reverby and heavy, and Tear It Loose is another really fast one on here. Great choice, Jax. And I was happy to shed a little light on this lesser known Twisted Sister album. And again, we're going to go to something completely different. At number 16, Will is going to talk about this album, and he's going to party like it's 1999. Y'all see what I did there.
This is a great album. It's totally different than a lot of what we've talked about so far, and totally different than what I listen to probably 95% of the time. But Prince has some awesome stuff. This is his 5th album. The album before Purple Rain, but it was 2 years before. Actually, I just kind of clued in. This was his first album with his band, The Revolution. Before this, it was just Prince. And so this was his, I have some notes because I'm not a Prince expert or anything. This is his first top 10 album on the Billboard 200. 1999 peaked at 12. I also know it was popular in the year 1999. And this album also reached the charts again the year he passed away. So it's been on the charts through the years. Delirious peaked at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, and Little Red Corvette peaked at number 6, which was his highest single until at this point in time. Another interesting note is Delirious is 4 minutes long and is the shortest song on the album. There's 7 songs out of the 11 longer than 6 minutes. The album's over an hour, but it's just great stuff. Lady Cab Driver is probably my favorite song on here. One of my favorite Prince songs of all time. It's like 9 minutes almost, but there's just poppy, fun, just really good stuff from Prince.
I just want to say, when you're in a bad mood, I challenge anyone. If you can listen to Delirious and not instantly get happy or cheered up, I applaud you. Because I listen to that song, I'm just like, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's such a peppy song. I love it. I love Delirious. And the whole album is great too.
A little
I'll say
Red
this,
Corvette.
anytime
what a
somebody,
great song. Like, I mean, I know it's been said before, but what a fantastic song.
and for people that talk about Prince, he's such an underrated guitar player. I'll say that every time.
Yeah.
He's so underrated as a guitar player.
Good basketball player too, right? Well,
Oh, of course. Excellent. Excellent at
good
basketball.
game glasses. I had to say that. Okay, so number 15. This is a fun one. Jax and I were very consistent on this one, and Will, I just don't know I never know with Will. That's what keeps it fun. I never know. Will rated this album at number 40. I rated it at number 10, but Jax rated it at number 8. So he's going to be telling us about Aerosmith's Rockin' a Hard Place. And I think this might be the first one that all three of us have held up, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. I love this album. Tim and I, we discussed this before. We both have an appreciation for the underappreciated Aerosmith albums, being this one and its predecessor, which is Night in the Ruts. We both love those albums, and they're not their most successful, but because it was a dark period for the band, right? There was tension all around. Joe Perry left. He joined the Joe Perry Project, or he formed the Joe Perry Project, rather. And on this one here, he was replaced by Jimmy Crespo, who took over not only lead guitar, but rhythm guitar too, which I had totally forgotten because Brad Whitford, he only appeared on one song, Lightning Strikes. Then he left. He formed Whitford St. Holmes with Derek St. Holmes of Ted Nugent fame. So he's not on here. And Rick Dufay appears right here as a rhythm guitarist, but he doesn't play on the album. He toured with the band, but he's not on the album. So there were, again, the trend, people being pictured on albums that didn't play on the albums. Again, to be continued. But all that being said, speaking of the cover, this I think is the only time I remember seeing Joey Kramer with a beard, which always throws me off guard. Does not look like him.
It looks like Michael Anthony.
Yeah, actually a little bit, yeah. But all that aside, even if it was a dark period for the band, even if it's a different lineup, the most different lineup in their whole career, it is a fantastic album. I listened to it the other day again, and it's just very consistent. Like I say, listen to the song Jig Is Up and tell me that doesn't sound like classic Aerosmith, because it does to me. Like it sounds like it could have been on one of their 70s albums. What else? Vicious Brew, Lightning Strikes. Lightning Strikes was actually a bit of a hit for them, and it appeared on later issues of the Greatest Hits.
And a very, very, very funny video. I don't think it was intentionally funny. You got to check it out.
Yeah, I
beating the
it's been a while. I
watermelons
have
up
to
with
take
baseball bats, and they were dressed like a street gang. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But that's pretty much all I can say. I love it. I think it's a great album, and for those of you who didn't like it at the time, maybe give it a second chance. You might just like it this time around.
And then again, there's Will. So Will, I'm curious. I know you have a love-hate relationship with Aerosmith. Why did this album place number 40 for you?
It's just not good. It's not a good album. I listened to all the Aerosmith albums over the summer. We actually talked about it as I was listening through them. I just don't like this album at all, which is weird because Done with Mirrors I really like, and this album I just can't. I don't even know if I made it through the whole thing in one go. I had to do it in 2 different days. I just don't like it.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's fine. I don't know. I think
can't wait for the comments.
They and it's funny because Rick Dufay didn't actually play on it. But you can't have Aerosmith on tour without 2 guitarists. There's too many parts in the songs that need it. Also, if you want to hold up the back cover, one of you guys, look at that picture of Rick Dufay on the back cover with the smoke behind him. Now that sums up this period in Aerosmith's career better than anything. They were so smacked out. It's a wonder they got an album out. It's a wonder they were able to stand up, never mind put out a pretty decent sounding album. Yeah, Tyler was such bad shape. I mean, this and of course when Spinal Tap came out and they had their Stonehenge thing, this album looked even sillier. This album took about 7 years to go gold. It was the first album that Aerosmith had that didn't do very well. and didn't at least go gold. And it eventually went platinum, but that's only on the strength of what came after it. So I think it's a good album. So now we're going to move on to number 14. I guess I'll be talking about this, although Will and I rated it quite close. He rated it at 16. I rated it at 12. It is Alice Cooper's Zipper Catches Skin. And this is from Alice's Blackout period. I've got a pretty old cassette here of it. And this is a weird album, like so many of his albums during this time, like Flesh to Fashion and Special Forces and Dada. I really like this album, though. I think it is so catchy. It's got some of his strangest lyrics on it. And he kept it very well hid. There were rumors of it, but apparently he was doing all kinds of coke during this period. Like, a lot of people knew Alice as having problems with alcohol, but in the early 80s, he switched to cocaine. And that's why you see pictures of him in this area. He's rail thin. His cheekbones are protruding. He does not look well. He still sang really well, and he still put together catchy songs. One of my favorites on here, I first heard it on his box set, is a song called Tag You're It, which is essentially, if you're a horror movie buff, I would say listen to that song and make sure you get the lyrics to it, because it's essentially Alice narrating a horror movie. And it's just really cool. So yeah, check out Tag You're It if you check out nothing else on here. But just the song titles. Zorro's Ascent, Make That Money, Scrooge's Song, No Baloney Homo Sapiens, Remarkably Insincere, and my favorite title, the last song, I'm Alive. That was the day my dead pet returned to save my life. Now, you'd think this was a comedy album from the titles, but if you listen to it and you don't really pay attention to the lyrics, it's just good hard rock. And no one ever, none of these albums certified, but I really like it. That's really all I got to say about Zipper Catches Skin. So now we're moving on. We're getting there. We're number 13. This is another album that I was quite surprised. I thought I'd be the one talking about it if any of us were talking about it. And I rated it at number 14. Will rated it all the way up to number 7. It is Whitesnake, Saints and Sinners.
So this is another one, just like Scorpions. Listening to this, ranking it for this list was the first time I've heard this album the whole way through. I kind of got in the Whitesnake this summer, but stuck in the slide it in, self-titled, slip of the tongue era. So I had to go back a little bit to listen to this. This is their 5th album. Obviously has the original versions of Here I Go Again and Crying in the Rain, which this version of Here I Go Again I actually really like, because the 87 version is one of those songs that you just hear all the time, one of those ballads. But this version is different enough that I actually really like it. David Coverdale's vocals are amazing on this album. Not that they ever aren't, but on this album in particular, they're amazing. Victim of Love is a really cool song. Love and Affection, if you took the vocals off of Love and Affection and played it, it could be a Led Zeppelin song. That might be just me. But musically, it sounds very Led Zeppelin-like. And the title track is a really cool way to end the album. And I just like Scorpions, I listened to this album probably 6 to 8 times after not listening to it at all. So I love it.
Yeah, the opening song "Youngblood" is a really cool one. It's another one that's in I don't know if it's in D or in drop D, but it's really heavy sounding, and it's one of the first really heavy sounding Whitesnake songs they came up with. They still had the more of a bluesy element to them, but this was a sort of a turning point album. And you're right, I agree. I like the original version. Of "Crying in the Rain" is cool, and they certainly rocked it up for 1987. But Here I Go Again, yes. If you're sick of Here I Go Again, check out, the easiest thing, go on YouTube, check out the original video. Just type in Here I Go Again 1982 video. One of the main things you'll notice right away is that in the chorus, instead of singing like a drifter, he sings like a hobo. So, but it's the same song. It's the same song. So you're following along, you know how it goes, but it's not nearly as bombastic as the 87 version. It's more laid back, and it's cool. I like it. I like the fact that you can choose between the different versions. I just want to say something about the record. I actually found this record at Dexter's a long time ago, And this is actually not the easiest Whitesnake record to find. And the version I found is like a limited edition record where they were on tour in the UK. And this isn't a sticker, this is part of the back cover. So consider yourself lucky if you find a version of this. Now, it's significant that David Coverdale is the only one pictured on here, because this was about the time when he was, one of the many times he would just basically trash the entire band and start all over again. And then you got John Sykes and that whole saga. But a great record. And it was really nice to hear Will talk about it, because I was thinking I was going to be the one. So number 12 is another debut album. This one supposedly came out on April Fool's Day, 1982. And this is an album that I know for a fact that Jex just recently added to his collection not that many months ago. The debut album from Montreal's Aldo Nova. One guy, by the way, not a band. It's one guy. So yeah, his self-titled album, we've all got it. Most people know Fantasy, which is an 80s rock radio classic, his best known song. But this full album is just full of melodic rock music that in some ways paved the way for the success of a band called Bon Jovi. And there is significance there, because while he was recording his debut album, Aldo Nova that is, at Power Station Studio in New York City, a very young sort of a gopher type of guy that was doing whatever needed done, was working there for his uncle, whose name was Tony Bon Jovi. I'm talking, of course, about John Bon Jovi. So I think that Aldo Nova's early sound had a big influence on those early Bon Jovi records, and he never gets the credit for it. And he pretty much played, with the exception of the drums, if you read the liner notes, he pretty much played everything himself. All the vocals, all the background vocals, pretty much all the guitars, all the rhythm guitars, lead guitars, harmonies, piano, keyboards, and in some cases bass. He was basically a one-man band, and with a drummer. So this album sold a couple million copies, deservedly so, and it deserves another look. And I'm always glad to turn people onto this album. So, all right. So next, number 11. Even though we're sort of in the hard rock metal realm for a lot of this, when you talk about music in 1982, it would be impossible to ignore the biggest selling album of all time. And of course, I mean, I knew this, right? Will ranked this at number 2. He's going to talk about it. Of course, it's Michael Jackson's Thriller. So take it away, Will. Oh, look, Jack says 2 copies.
This is the greatest album of all time. Now, I didn't rank it number 1 because I didn't say it's the best album, but it is the greatest album of all time, in my opinion. This is the 25th anniversary release of the CD. Super cool artwork. But this, I mean, what else can you say other than what? Estimated 70 million copies it sold at this point. So Michael Jackson obviously had a very musical career. So he was in the Jackson 5 and some other stuff. So he had 4 solo albums on Motown from 72 to 75, but Thriller would be his second release on Epic after Off the Wall came out, which Off the Wall was more of the disco still, and Thriller became more of the pop, rock, R&B genre of music for him, which he obviously became most popular for eventually. So the first single on this, I believe, was "The Girl Is Mine," which was with
that's such an odd factoid of all
yeah,
the
because
songs
it's not
for the label to listen to this album and go with that duet, which is, to my opinion, kind of a throwaway song, and say, no, that's the single. They didn't even do a video for it.
And it's not like Michael Jackson wasn't known where Paul McCartney is going to get him the sales. Like Off the Wall isn't thought of a huge album, but it still sold millions of copies.
It's huge. It was huge. Number 1 song. Yeah.
Right. Everyone knew him from Jackson 5. Everyone, like, it's not like he just came on, needed Paul McCartney for that, like, name factor. But then you got Billie Jean, Beat It, Want to Be Starting Something, Human Nature, Pretty Young Thing, or PYT, and then Thriller. Quincy Jones obviously produced this. That's fairly well known for Michael Jackson. So this was his first number 1 album on the US Billboard, and it was there for 37 weeks. which I believe is still the record. All the singles reached top 10 at some point. Billie Jean and Beat It both reached #1. And of course, he debuted the Moonwalk at the Motown 25 event, which I read that after he debuted the Moonwalk for Billie Jean, the next few weeks it sold like 1 million copies a week. After that again. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about this album all day. Everybody knows the cover. Everybody, whether you're a Michael Jackson fan or not, you know probably 4 songs off this album. The videos are cool. They're basically movies in terms of like Thriller. That's like, what, a 15-minute video. Everyone knows the dance. Everyone knows the Moonwalk. This album is just amazing. I mean, it's the greatest album of all time, sales-wise, and I can't see it being beat probably ever.
Probably since this aired, it sold another 500,000. Just because.
Yeah, just because.
Yeah, I mean, there's 9 songs. The 9 songs on this album, 7 of the 9 songs were not only singles but were top 10. That's crazy. That never happened. And that was the beginning of the blockbuster albums in the 80s too. Musicianship wise, the album I held up a while ago, Toto IV, a lot of that band are the backing musicians on here as far as guitars and drums. And as a matter of fact, Toto keyboard player Steve Porcaro co-wrote Human Nature, which probably keeps his rent paid to this very day. And I have to say, we're all big hard rock fans here. Of all of Eddie Van Halen's guitar solos, it's not my favorite solo, but the pick slide that Eddie does at the end of the Beat It solo sends shivers up my spine every time I hear it. It's the best pick slide ever, the way it just glides down. And that solo was not, I don't know if it was a one take, but it was pretty off the cuff. And the only thing I know really about it is that he, originally it was just going to be that breakdown section where it's just dun 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 dun. And he said, "Can you give me some chords to solo over?" And that's when they used the verse chords for him to solo over. And he basically dug out his entire bag of tricks for that solo. It's got the tapping in it. It's a quintessential Eddie solo. My understanding is that it's the first time Jimmy Page ever heard Eddie Van Halen play, when he heard Beat It and said, "Who is that playing?" So, and the funny thing is that Eddie never asked for a dime, no royalties, not even a one-time studio payment, because he remember he was thinking, well, who's going to know? Who's going to care if I play on this kid's record? And it goes on to be the best-selling album of all time. That was just wow.
And that was, reading about that, he was offered royalties for that. It was like something small, but it could have been 0.1%, and he could have lived off of that one solo. Never mind all of the money he made from the songs that he was involved in and wrote and played on. Yeah, crazy. Like unreal. So now we're into the top 10. And speaking of Van Halen, I'm going to be talking about this one. We'll rate it. It's not bad. Jack's rated at 23. We'll rate it at 15, and I rated it at number 9. It's Sammy Hagar's 3 Lock Box, which was his second album on Geffen Records. It came out November 30th, 1982. This is probably my favorite of Sammy's solo albums. Marching to Mars I like a lot too. There you go. And this album gave Sammy his highest charting solo hit with the song Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy. That went all the way to number 13. The title song is awesome. Rise of the Animal is actually surprisingly heavy. You might be surprised how heavy it is. Another interesting song on here is the song Remember the Heroes, which is actually a duet between Sammy and Mike Reno of Loverboy. Also features Jonathan Cain of Journey on keyboards. So it's very radio friendly. It's very pop, hard rock, but it's just an enjoyable album from start to finish. And I've always really had a liking for this album.
I Don't Need Love, the closer, is a fantastic song.
That's a heavy one too. Yeah. Whoop. Hang on. All right, so now number 9, another debut album. Wikipedia tells me this came out on May 21st. Another one of my favorite unsung bands, Coney Hatch. This is I love this artwork. I used to think it was Hugh Syme that did this artwork, but it's not. I think it's Martin Soldat. And Martin Springett did the illustration. So I'm not sure what the significance is there. So this came out on Anthem Records in Canada and Mercury worldwide. They were signed to the same label and management as Rush. They don't sound anything like Rush. This band should have been a lot bigger. I don't know why they didn't click with more people, because they could be heavy and yet they could be really melodic at the same time. And they had Carl Dixon on lead vocals, who's a fantastic singer. Also had Andy Curran on bass and like some lead vocals. He had more of a punky kind of voice. So the two of them made for an interesting back and forth, not unlike a Paul and Gene type of situation. The song "Hey Operators," they're probably their best known song. It was a top 20 single in Canada. A year later, Aldo Nova covered it, oddly enough, which is unusual. The Coney Hatch version is better, in my opinion. First song, "Devil's Deck," is really, really cool. "We Got the Night" is a fast one. Whenever they do concerts, I think you'll see more songs from this than any other album. The closer, "Monkey Bars," is a great song. This album was actually produced by Kim Mitchell. So yeah, I'm just a huge fan of Coney Hatch. You can search back through the videos on TVC, and I've talked a lot about this band a lot.
The song "Monkey Bars" actually sounds like it could have been a Kim Mitchell song.
Yes. Yeah.
So when I was getting into the Canadian bands, Coney Hatch became very quickly one of my favorites for Canadian bands. Listening to their best of 3 greatest hits is a good mix of the first 3 albums. Well, I mean, they only have 4, but like it has a lot of songs off of this. But getting into them, I have listened to their albums a ton, and this is just a great album. Like Tim said, I don't know how they weren't bigger for their time, and it's just like there's no bad songs on it.
Yeah, the album went gold in Canada, but they didn't do nearly as well as they should have. But they still have a devout cult following, because they just put out that live album, live at the El Macombo last year, and very, very rare. I actually was lucky enough to get one. Okay, so next we have another debut album to talk about. And once again, this is one I thought maybe I'd be talking about, but I know Will really likes this band too. I rated it at number 7. He rated it all the way up to number 4. It's the first album by Night Ranger, and it is Dawn Patrol. So yeah, Will, tell us about Dawn Patrol.
This is probably my favorite Night Ranger album still. Night Ranger albums on CD, I'll say, that I know of, super hard to come across. So I had the greatest hits. Then I eventually found this on CD, and I loved it right from the start. I mean, Don't Tell Me You Love Me is obviously a great song. Sing Me Away. Eddie's Coming Out Tonight. It's a great song. There's just like good song after good song on this album. It's, like I said, my favorite Night Ranger album. It's awesome.
I think people might be surprised at how heavy some of the songs are. Like the final song, the song Night Ranger, goes into this jigga, 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 halfway through. Yeah. Eddie's Coming Out Tonight's a heavy song. Can't Buy a Thrill. They're not Can't Buy Me a Thrill, but yeah, Can't Buy a Thrill. That's pretty heavy. Play Rough is heavy. Don't Tell Me You Love Me is one of the best melodic rock songs ever. I love the combination of the heavy distorted guitar and the sort of jangly guitar in the verses, and the beginning of it, and the guitar solo with Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson. That's a great guitar solo. That might be one of my favorite guitar solos too. Great album. So next up, we are ready to talk about some classic British heavy metal, some classic British steel, if you like. And Jex is going to talk about this one. This is Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. Take it away, Jex.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, this is probably my favorite Judas Priest album, and I think that's because it's the first Judas Priest I ever heard in its entirety. First album I ever found by them. It was on cassette at the time, and I listened to it. like I've said with many other albums, they blew me away. Rob Halford's vocals, those high-pitched falsettos, everything about it was just great. Opens up with a song called The Hellion, which flawlessly transitioned into Electric Eye, which it's just like one big song, but it has two titles here. But it starts the album beautifully. I know I've been saying that a lot, but it's true. A lot of these albums have great openers. There's no denying that. And it has probably one of their biggest hits on here, which is You Got Another Thing Coming, which I think is still a concert staple to this day for Priest. And that came from this album. Devil's Child, Take These Chains. A bit of it's not as heavy as the others, but I still like that song. Bloodstone is another favorite, and this is the record. I also have it on CD here. Same one that Will has, I believe. This is the remastered reissue from 2001. And the strange thing about this one is I got to mention this real quick. It's got two bonus tracks: Devil's Child, a live performance, which is great, but it has Prisoner of Your Eyes, which is actually from the Turbo sessions. And anyone who's heard those two albums, Turbo and Screaming for Vengeance, they don't sound alike at all. They're two drastically different sounding albums. So when the album finishes and that bonus track comes on, it's kind of like, whoa, it's such a weird contrast. So I always thought, like, didn't they have any like unused track? There must be an unreleased track from these sessions, but apparently not. But that being said, it's still a great album. And I think we lost Tim.
I think we did lose Tim. There he
and
is.
He's back. We can keep that in. That was actually pretty good. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say anyway about Screaming for Vengeance. I love it.
Okay, so next up, we're going to go to really, when you talk about classic heavy metal bands, if you've already talked about Judas Priest, chances are the next one you're going to talk about is Iron Maiden. And their breakthrough album came out in 1982. Will is going to talk to us about The Number of the Beast.
This was my introduction to Maiden. I kind of avoided them for a really long time because the stuff I was into, like Kiss and Van Halen and Rush and I guess Alice to some extent, but I just assumed they were like super heavy, like super heavy, which would have been against anything that I would have listened to at the time. But I mean, this album is like amazing. So you have Bruce Dickinson on vocals. This is his first album.
Yeah.
Is that right? So yeah. But there's just like The Number of the Beast, obviously great. Run to the Hills would have been my very first introduction because I was on Guitar Hero 3, I believe, which is where a lot of introductions to bands came for me. Hallowed by Thy Name, the final song, that song is amazing. But yeah, this album is just super good, heavy, probably a little bit heavier than Screaming for Vengeance in total, at least in my opinion. But this is just an amazing album from start to finish.
So now we are about to enter our top 5. And before we do that, thought maybe we'd change it up a little bit, change things up, and talk about some honorable mentions, some albums that from 1982 that we like but didn't quite make our final list. So we'll get Will to start us off with his honorable mentions for 1982.
So I have 2. The first one being Bad Company, Rough Diamonds. This is actually the version from the Swan Song box set. So it kind of has this little, I'm assuming this would have been the record sleeve.
Yeah.
The original record sleeve. And then it has the CD is the Swan Song. But yeah, this is just Bad Company is one of those bands that I kind of get into thinking they were an 80s band, not a 70s band. But yeah, this album is just good, classic rock. And my other one is the first Billy Idol album. This is a 2 CD set. So yeah, it's just, I mean, White Wedding is obviously a huge hit for his. Hot in the City is a good song. And some other good stuff on here. But yeah, those are 2 honorable mentions.
All right, Jax, what are your honorable mentions for 1982?
So my first honorable mention is one I actually don't have on any format, so I can't show it. But even if I did have it, I probably couldn't show it anyway. But if you're not offended by nudity or violence, I recommend you Google the cover art for Death Penalty by a band called Witchfinder General.
Don't
Which
do
is
it at work.
What's
don't
that?
do it at work.
Oh yeah, don't do it at work.
Yes. No.
No, thank you, Tim.
Not safe for work. No.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, not safe for work. But the album, if you just listen to the music, it's some great stuff. They were obviously inspired they were inspired by Black Sabbath. So if you're into Sabbath, they got a lot of that similar type sound. If you like bands, the early 80s, like doom metal bands like Saint Vitus, Trouble, you'll probably really like Witchfinder General, and Death Penalty is a great album. The second one I'm going to talk about, I have 3 in total here. Real quick, this is The Clash, Combat Rock, which is definitely different from the early stuff, London Calling or anything like that. Their debut doesn't sound anything like this, but it's got a lot of their biggest hits: Rock the Casbah, Should I Stare, Should I Go? I love Straight to Hell and Overpowered by Funk. A lot of just variety on here. They were definitely at their experimental phase. So that's Combat Rock. And finally, my last one is Devo with Oh No, It's Devo, which I recently spun again, and it's actually better than I remembered. So that's why it made my honorable mention. This is, again, the early new wave movement of the early 80s. It's got some great stuff. My kids were really into it. Funnily enough, they were like just bouncing and dancing. It's just quirky, it's upbeat. My oldest son really liked this cover because they're all like potatoes. He got a kick out of that. He wanted to watch it. He thought it was like a kid's show, like The Wiggles or something. But yeah, a great album. Those are my honorables.
I remember, I think I had a cousin that had that record when I was a kid, and I remember being just laughing so hard at that cover.
So strange.
So I've got 3 honorable mentions to talk about. The first one is Cheap Trick One on One. This is a great album. This is the only album of theirs that was produced by Roy Thomas Baker, and it's got a lot of the Roy Thomas Baker over-the-top sound. Of course, at this point, he was probably best known. He worked with Queen in the 70s and then Journey. But in the late 70s, early 80s, he produced the first 4 Cars albums. And this kind of sounds more like that than anything else. Maybe a little bit more distorted on the guitars. Let's see. The ballad "If You Want My Love" was the #1 hit in Australia, but nowhere else in the world. And the other well-known song on here is the song "She's Tight," which is kind of a fun, slightly naughty song. As a matter of fact, Steel Panther recently, the last few years, did a version of that song with Robin Zander, Cheap Trick, guesting on it. So yeah, it didn't quite make my list, but it was a good album. I wanted to talk about it. Another one, 1982, another debut. This time it's a solo debut, certainly not a brand new artist. Robert Plant, Pictures at 11. This was his debut solo album after the end of Led Zeppelin. And I don't like this album nearly as much as the one that would come after it, Principle of Moments. I think I really like about half of it. The other half I just tend to not remember after I play it. But right off the bat, he makes it known that he is not going to continue sounding like Led Zeppelin for the most part, except for a couple songs. Burning Down One Side and Slow Dancer are the closest I think he came to sounding like Zeppelin in his solo career. What's interesting about actually the first 2 Robert Plant solo albums is that the majority of the drums are by Phil Collins. And regardless of what people might think about Phil Collins as an artist in Genesis, he's a great drummer, and it really adds a lot. He's got a very distinctive snare sound, hi-hat sound, and it really propels these songs. So wanted to give it a mention. Not my favorite, but come close. And the last one, mostly I'm mentioning it because I'm such a fan of this band, generally considered to be their worst or their second worst album. It is Queen and Hot Space. This is the dance funk Queen album. The only recognizable song for most people on here is Under Pressure, which actually came out as a single the year before when their greatest hits came out. So it doesn't really belong on this album. I did a whole Contrarians panel where we discussed the pros and cons of this album. It's definitely the most discussed Queen album. One thing that's funny about this, you'll see this tape is kind of different. It's got this blue writing on it, but on side 2, I don't know if you can tell, but it's crooked. It's like off by a little bit, but kind of a rare cassette there too. So those are my honorable mentions. Now we're ready to enter our top 5 of 1982. This is one of the more consistently ranked albums. Will and I both ranked this at number 13. Jex rated it at number 10. And in a move that will shock a lot of people, Jex is going to be talking to us about Y&T Black Tiger.
Oh, wow. I did not think I'd be talking about it. Yeah, here it is, Black Tiger. I have the cassette as well. Hey, we have different cassettes there, Tim.
Yeah, yours is, I have yours too. It's Canadian. Mine's an American one.
Nice,
That's the
nice.
difference. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not a Y&T connoisseur like Tim, so I'll probably let him do most of the talking. But all I'm gonna say, I listened to this again the other day, and it's just a fine album. They were really in top form in the early '80s. The opening track is "From the Moon," which it's just like a 40-second intro, which is actually the opening of "Forever," if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yeah, they reprised that melody. Yeah.
Right. But here it doesn't have drums. While in the song it does have drums, which I thought was kind of cool. But everything about it, Open Fire, Black Tiger, My Way or the Highway, it's just an enjoyable album. That's all I have to say. I re-listening to it the other day, I really had a blast. So yeah.
I'll just say a little bit because I know Tim is just dying to have a full conversation about this album. Like Jack said, this is just a really good rock album the whole way through. I will say my little dig is I think Forever is a little bit overrated. I don't love that song, but I know a lot of people do. But yeah, this is just a great album. Winds of Change to End is a really good song. Yeah, just another solid album.
So you might be wondering why it's relatively low for me. They are one of my favorite bands. That doesn't mean that I think all of their albums are 10s. And this is in their prime period where they're generally considered, their best albums are this one, Earthshaker, the one before it, Mean Streak, the one after. This to me is the poor one of the three. And it is certainly not that it's a bad album. There's a few things. One, I've never been the biggest fan of the production on this album, which is done by Max Norman, a well-known producer, but it seems like it's very bass heavy and not quite enough treble for my taste. The snare doesn't crack the way that I'd like it to. And I don't know, it sounds like I've just never been a big fan of the production on this album. The songs speak for themselves. I mean, Open Fire is a classic opener for them. Don't Want to Lose is one of the many Y&T songs that should have been a hit single. I think Forever is fantastic. Black Tiger, the title song, is a classic F-sharp riff, and it's got some of Dave Benichetti's classic helicopter soloing where he just murders this toggle switch. So it's got the sound, which only he does. I've never heard anybody else do that. Another thing I've never been the biggest fan of Barroom Boogie, which I know is a concert staple for them. To me, it's what Bart and Popoff would refer to as a one-take stripper tune. It's kind of a little below their standards, and they've never really liked My Way or the Highway. That song just kind of struck me as, I don't know. And whereas like a lot of their albums, I like every single song on them. So that's why, Black Tiger is great and I listen to it and I love it, but that's why it came relatively low for me. So I'm surprised to see it reach the top 5, and I'm surprised it was you guys that helped it get there. So that was the most fun thing about doing this list by far. So, all right, at number 4 is an album that I'm surprised it ranked this high. As a matter of fact, it was an album that there was some discussion. Do we consider this an actual album? But the consensus is that, yes, we do consider it an actual album, even though the songs range from various years. The fact is, not many people heard these songs before it came out. So it is the final album by Led Zeppelin, Coda. And Will ranked this the highest. So we'll let Will talk about Coda.
I was hoping I didn't rank this one the highest because I honestly don't know the whole thing about where the tracks came from or the time periods they came from. But in terms of musically, this album is just really good. I mean, it's Led Zeppelin. You basically know what you're getting for the most part of what you're going to get. But there's just good songs on here. We're Gonna Groove, the first song. Walter's Walk is a good song. Ozone Baby. I mean, it's just good Led Zeppelin music.
Yeah. So go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was just going to say the first couple of songs, like We're Gonna Groove, is from the sessions for the second Zeppelin album.
Yeah.
And I think Poor Tom, the second song, was from the third album sessions. I don't know why they put another version of I Can't Quit You Baby on here. It's apparently a sound check version, but we all know that there are other songs that they could have put on here. They could have put on Traveling Riverside Blues or Hey Hey What Can I Do, which it was years before those ones surfaced. But Walter's Walk is interesting. That was actually recorded musically. The bed track was recorded for I believe Houses of the Holy. Houses of the Holy. And the story is that that's a brand new vocal from Robert Plant on that, because if you listen to him sing that, it sounds a lot like his first solo album. It doesn't sound like the way he sang in the 70s. So that's kind of the newest bit of music, maybe. A lot of the songs on the second half are songs they recorded for In For the Outdoor, which is my favorite Zeppelin album, but it's a lot more of the up-tempo songs like Ozone Baby, Darlene, and especially the closer.
Wearing and Tearing.
Wearing and Tearing. I couldn't think of the name of it, but yeah, that's a fat and then it's got the other thing is Bonzo's Montreux, which is another cool. It's a companion to Moby Dick, where it's just basically a John Bonham drum showcase. But yeah, it holds together as an album. They put it out because they had another album owing on the Swan Song contract. They definitely weren't going to continue without John Bonham, so that's what they put out, and that was it. You know, it's strange to think of a Led Zeppelin album existing in the 80s, which it kind of does, kind of doesn't. But my thing is I consider Def Leppard Retroactive to be an album. So if we're going to call that an album, we have to call Coda an album. So that brings us to number 3. And again, I never know how Will's going to rank albums. I really don't. So this one I rank the highest. I think I might have ranked this at number 2, actually, but it comes in for number 3. It is Rush and Signals. And this is the first really synth-heavy album. It's the beginning of that phase of their career. I think this is a fantastic album. It contains my favorite Rush song, which is Subdivisions. It's only the 3rd Rush album that I heard all the way through. I got it for Christmas on cassette in 1987, and I was just getting into the band. Jex is a very old Canadian Columbia House cassette there. This album contains their sole US top 40 single. And the funny thing about Rush is if you were to say to people, well, Rush had one top 40 single, what do you think it is? Most people would probably think it was Tom Sawyer, but it's not. It was actually New World Man, went all the way to number 21. This also has Chemistry is a favorite song of mine. I absolutely love Analog Kid. I love this album. I can't shoot holes in this album at all. I love it. And that's why I ranked it so highly. So I don't know, either of you guys have anything to say about?
I might. Real quick, my first introduction, you mentioned New World Man. That was my introduction to this album. Because when I first started buying records, I was buying a lot of compilations, the K-Tel stuff, because they were easily accessible. So I got this Hit Explosion from 83. And as you can see right here, Rush. And the song on here is New World Man. So that was the first song from Signals I ever heard. And
nice.
And I just listened to the album the other day. It'd been ages. I remember nothing. And I really like the whole album. Better than I thought. Because the later 80s Rush After Moving Pictures for me is kind of hit or miss. But it was a lot better than I remembered.
So my record actually still has the shrink wrap on it. And the hype sticker is for New World Man.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I replayed this for the rankings, and I remember really loving this album, but I just found it a little bit boring. I know that sounds weird for a Rush album, and I'm not against the after Moving Pictures, everything sucked. Like, I still like the 80s Rush, and I really like Subdivisions and Digital Man, and there's a lot of good stuff on this. But it just must have caught me on a bad day between Iron Maiden and Judas Priest or something. But I don't know. But I still think it's a great album, but it did rank a bit lower than I even expected it to.
Okay. Cool. All right. So number two. This album ranked higher than I thought it would have. I thought it might have been in the 8-9 range. I actually ranked it at 15. Will ranked it at 5, and Jex ranked it at 4. So he gets to talk about the 5th Van Halen album, Diver Down. Released Not sure. I didn't look that up when it was released. I think it came out in the summertime. So yeah,
I can tell you. Give me a second. April 14th.
I love that photo. I love that photo.
This is such a cool back photo.
Yeah.
So Diver Down, not a fan favorite, at all, because well, you'd hear a lot of fans saying, "Oh, it's so short for an album, or it's basically an EP, or it's got major." It's mostly all covers, because I think there's 5
over
covers.
half. Over half of this album is covers.
So again, it wasn't great for it wasn't a big sell for fans, but even for a while, for me, it's my least favorite of the David Lee Roth era, but I still think it's a great album. It's the covers, yes, they're covers, but they're still good. Like "Oh Pretty Woman," I think they do a great job with that. "Where Have All the Good Times Gone," "Dancing in the Street." It's still Van Halen. Great musicianship here. They still do a great job with the covers, and the original stuff, with little guitars, is really good. I'm trying to think of what else. Hang 'em High. Hang 'em High is probably my favorite song on here. That is a great song on the heavier side. And I have a soft spot for, there's a little song, it closes the album. It's called "Happy Trails," which I think is just such a great closer. It's a cappella. You hear them laughing. They're having fun. And I'm going to tell a real story real quick. I'm going to make a long story short. But the day after Eddie passed away, I was driving to Halifax with my family, and we were listening to music, and whatever CD we listened to finished. So I was looking for a radio station, and one station was paying tribute to Eddie Van Halen. And to my surprise, they're playing mostly songs from Diver Down, which I thought was kind of unusual, because you think the debut or 1984, those are like the big Van Halen albums. But a lot of Diver Down, I think they played "Pretty Woman," little guitars, but they finished it with "Happy Trails," which I thought was really cool. And once the song was done, the announcer, it was a female announcer, and she said, I'm going to paraphrase it, but she said something, "To finish our tribute today, that was Happy Trails," as Eddie walks off into the sunset. And this never really happens, but I got misty. I got teary-eyed, because the combination of the song and those words, and the fact he just passed away, it was like, I got emotional, man, it was very weird for me, but I thought it was a great way to pay tribute to the man. And again, not my favorite, probably my least favorite, but I still give it frequent spins, and I like to revisit it from time to time.
I went through a phase where, I bought this album quite early. I bought all the first 8 Van Halen albums. I bought them all in 1988. It just worked out that way. And the other weird thing is I practically bought them in reverse order. And I remember I got Diver Down at the very end of grade 8. I think the last day of grade 8, bought it that night, and I listened to it a lot. But then, starting sometime in the mid-90s, all of a sudden it wasn't cool to like Diver Down anymore. And I sort of bought into that. I'm like, yeah, there's too many covers on it, and it's so short. And after a while, it's like, I remember why I used to listen to this all the time. It's fun. It's a fun album. It's like Fair Warning. It's short and you never get bored. It's just done before you know it, but you've enjoyed it all. One of the originals I think is underrated on this album is Secrets. It's kind of laid back for them. I think it's a really cool vocal from Dave. I was severely bummed out when Eddie died. I think I went through a funk for a couple of days at least, where I'm just like, not like I knew him or anything. I just couldn't believe it. Will, Diver Down, your thoughts?
I ranked this at number 5, I think. I so wanted to rank this higher. In terms of Van Halen, they would have been the second band I get into. They played one thing when I saw them in 2015, before they played little guitars, they actually played physically little guitars, and Dave said, "Budget cuts." And I'll never forget that. When I listen to Little Guitars, he says that, and it makes me laugh every time. But everyone says covers. When I got into Van Halen, I didn't know any of these songs were covers except maybe "Pretty Woman." You can't listen to "Pretty Woman" on this and then listen to the original and tell me that's the same song. Van Halen made covers their own. Pretty Woman. Even starting with "Intruder," which goes into "Pretty Woman." They're covers, but they're Van Halen songs at this point. I think I heard the Van Halen version of "Pretty Woman" before I heard the original. Like Big Bad Bill, "Sweet William Now," like Jack said, "Happy Trails." There's just so much fun and short, and I can't say enough good things. The first 6 Van Halen albums are obviously my favorite, but Diver Down is just a great album, and it's so much fun to listen to every time. You never get tired of it.
The other cool thing about it is that on Big Bad Bill, that's Alex and Eddie's father, Jan Van Halen, on the clarinet. And that's the only time that he was a musician. Like he played in wedding bands and things like that when the boys were, well, not even born, but when they were just kids. That was their introduction to music. But that's the only time they ever recorded. He ever had a recording. So I'm sure that meant a lot to, Eddie and Alex, especially because he died, I think, in 86, 87. So yeah, where they captured him, the 3 Van Halens. And so, I mean, that's a tradition that would continue.
I have another really quick story about this album. I was in, a couple bands in high school, but our music tastes were all over the place. So like some of them like Pink Floyd and the Beatles. That's not really my thing. So we try to find in-between songs to play for talent shows. I wanted to play a Van Halen song or a Kiss song or something. So I tried to get them to play the original version of Pretty Woman, and I would have just done a different bass to make it all sound cool. They still didn't go for it. But yeah, in terms of being covers, that's a Van Halen song to me.
Well, Van Halen's very first single, the very first hit, was a cover. If it was "You Really Got Me," they take those songs and they make them their own. So
exactly.
And plus, like you said, a lot of those songs, I didn't know where Have All the Good Times Gone was a Kinks song until later. I'd never heard it before. I kind of figured, I knew Happy Trails. That's just one of those old Western songs. That actually shows off how well those guys sing together too. There you go. All right. So this is a lot of fun. Number 1 is the one album that we all ranked very, very closely. Will and I both ranked it at number 1. Jack's ranked it at number 3. That's definitely the closest of all our rankings. I've got several copies of this to show you, but I'm going to let Will talk about Kiss, Creatures of the Night, the number 1 album for 1982.
There's so much you can say about the second best album Kiss ever released.
Available in red, or available in blue and red.
This album is, from start to finish, heavy and catchy and just like all over the place in terms of the different styles. Like Creatures of the Night is a great album opener. It would be a great show opener. Saint Sinner, Rock and Roll Hell, I Still Love You shows off Paul's vocals. Amazing. War Machine is a great album closer. It's a great song live. It's just one of the most perfect albums, one of the most perfect rock albums out there, I think. The cover's cool. The artwork's cool. It's just amazing.
Oddly enough, when I was just getting into Kiss, I always liked I Love It Loud. Even before I liked the band, that video would come on Much Music on the Power Hour. I'd always watch it. I didn't really know anything about the band. One of the funny things is that, later on, it was like, I didn't know. I thought Paul sang everything. Clearly I didn't know anything about the band. But then again, if all you saw were the videos in the 80s, Paul sang everything. He sang all the singles that came out. So, but anyway, I remember I had a handful of Kiss CDs at this point. I don't even think I had any vinyl at this point. And one of the first things that brought me into the realm of this album was we actually went to a video store, Matt and I did, and rented the Animalized Live Uncensored concert from Cobo Hall. And this is played, they still rented it. It probably hadn't been rented in years. And took that to Matt's apartment and watched it. And everything on that album is really, really sped up. But I remember they went into War Machine. And I heard that riff. And I'm like, what is that? I need that. I need the album that's on. And we had a class trip, second year NBCC radio broadcast. We had a class trip to Montreal. And on that trip, I remember going to the mall, probably Champlain Place, and buying this cassette. And for those of you that don't know, this is the 1985 reissue of Creatures of the Night. They remixed it slightly, and I think that they moved Saint and Sinner and Killer. I think they moved their positions on the album, which makes no sense. But and they did this reissue cover with Bruce Kulick, which again makes even less sense. But they were trying to remarket it as a new album, I think. But until the 1997 remasters came out, this was the only way you could get Creatures of the Night unless you found it used. So I bought it, listened to it, loved the album, absolutely fell in love with it. And I made it my mission to track down the real cover, even though Ace is on the cover and he doesn't play on it either. So it was quite a thing when I tracked this down, the original cassette on Casablanca. And then it was totally unexpected when I found the original vinyl. And I love this album cover so much. And I love this album. It's hard for me to say enough about it. The only other thing I want to say about the 1985 issue is if you get it on record or CD, watch out, because this is the back cover. And we're not sure what's going on, who that is. So maybe the less said, the better. So
I think I heard that's Gene. I think that's Gene from what I heard.
That's what everybody seems to think. So in 1997, when the remastered CDs came out, I made a beeline to get this. But yeah, this album, there was no doubt in my mind I was going to rank this at number one. And it's cool to see that the three of us agree on at least one album. So anybody else have anything to add about Creatures of the Night, Jax?
I might maybe. For a while, I thought it was going to be my number one as well. But again, you had I think Maiden made my number one. But I knew Kiss had to be in the top five for sure, because I love this is probably one of my favorite Kiss albums, along with the Hotter Than Hell. I think those are like my top Kiss albums. I love this one. And they were in a tight spot in 82, Kiss, after Unmasked, they had promised fans, okay, we're going to make something heavy, for the fans. And then Music from the Elder did not deliver that promise at all. It was not well received. All those got a cult following. I know we're all fans of the Elder, but at the time in 81, did not do well. Fans were losing hope. So Kiss had to, really prove themselves and say, like, we're back. And they certainly did that with this Creatures of the Night. And what I think deserves to be said, credit where credit is due, Eric Carr on drums, amazing, because he didn't really have a chance to prove himself on the Elder. There's no picture of the band. He's not on the cover. His drums don't really stand out as much as they do here. I mean, he
didn't even play on all the songs.
Oh yeah, right. There you go. But you push play on this thing and it's thunderous is the best way I could describe it. And even like I Love It Loud, which I love that song. It's just dum dum dum. He really had this chance to shine here, which I think is great. And I always loved his makeup. This was the first time I remember seeing this in a record store before I was really into Kiss, and I was familiar with the original, the cat makeup with Peter Criss, and I was like, who's this? This is some cool makeup. So yeah, it's a really good album all the way through. I enjoyed listening to it again, and this is what I was talking about. Ace Frehley on the cover, doesn't appear on the album, much like Rick Dufay and Aerosmith. So it's kind of a trend in 82, and again being re-recorded in 85. Not re-recorded, but reissued, remixed. But
it's definitely remixed. It's definitely remixed. If you listen to the two versions, they turn down the reverb, and I love that the reverb is what makes it cool. And if you really want to hear the difference, listen to I Love It Loud on Creatures, and then listen to I Love It Loud on Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. Way different. Yeah, same recording. They tweaked it a lot.
For sure. Yeah. And I love that video. You mentioned the music video for I Love It Loud. It's so cheesy, but I love it. Like when the telephone melts and just things like that. Things start blowing up in the house. It's cheesy, but I love it. And Ace appears in it. Doesn't play on the album. It's Vinnie Vincent, right? But Ace is in the video once again. Good old contractual obligations.
Yeah.
But, I'm happy to see this at number one.
He did all those appearances, and weird. But so there you go, guys. That's 40 years back in history, 19 82 our choices for the top 30 albums as we rank them. What did we miss? What do you think should have been there? Do you agree with our choices? All the comments are welcome. Keep it friendly, though. These are just our opinions. And Jax, Will, thank you very much for joining me. We are going to be doing more episodes like this. Definitely are. So thank you all for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.